Let me give some of the backstory. I'm going to tell you how Dave and I got to meet, and then we'll talk a little bit about Boundtree, and then move on to beer, among other things. So, and more story about this, Slishman Essentials, the thing that I've been doing lately. This is the first time I've had direct interest in one of the products or the topic being sold. All of the other conversations I've had, I don't have any direct interest. They're just, products that intrigue me. And so what I've been trying to do is give people a chance to talk about their item and do a deeper dive about things that they have been working on. And so this is a little bit different. I call this our COVID holiday special. And I thought I'd have a deep dive with Dave here. So,
Yeah, I'm working on a vaccine.
oh, good man. Good man.
All right, David.
So Dave and I met at Ambex, a trade show in England, back in, I think, 2004, 2005. Yeah, crazy, right? He took a look at the ski pole traction splint that I was working on. And then a few months later, I went and visited him in New Hampshire at the houseboat. We got to talking about a nonprofit that I've been working on. And then shortly after that, he became our treasurer. And so he would fly to New Mexico every 3 months to, you all right?
Yeah, that was okay. I was just referring about the twisting of the arm being a treasurer.
So every 3 months he'd come out. I would pick him up in my Chevy Nova, and we would just go crazy over the books for a weekend and have a good time. And then he'd fly back. And that, interestingly, that nonprofit was aimed at helping people with drug and alcohol problems. So fast forward a few more years, and Dave had a warehouse, a Boundtree warehouse that needed some new business in it. And he'd been talking to some people, and he said, "Hey, would you like to invest in a brewery?" And to me, it seemed very far from anything I would consider, but I knew that it would keep me tied up with Dave a little longer. So I invested, and here we are today. It was
8 years later.
It was worth it. Yeah. So I thought I'd start by asking Dave, his backstory with Boundtree first. Like what is a Boundtree? What led to Boundtree, Hat's Peak, and that sort of thing?
All right. Well, I mean, basically, I was working at Pat's Peak Skier as the general manager. And one day, this young lady came to my office to try to sell me a device that an EMT friend of hers was manufacturing on Martha's Vineyard. And it was called the Sherman Short Spine Board System. And it was unlike anything that was currently on the market. Actually, I guess the KED was on the market at the time as well, which was a similar device. But this was basically a body conforming vest with a conventional backboard on it. And so at the time, I was kind of not that happy with my employment at the Peak. And so I was looking for options. And long story short, I wound up basically selling that device for Mr. Sherman. And when I found out that there was a really good market, she thought that there would be a good market for it on the ski slopes. When people, crashed and burned on the slopes, and they would put them in that and put them in the toboggan and bring them down the bottom of the hill. And thus, preventing any further, spinal immobilization so that there was no further injury. But it really didn't have a really good application for that, but it had a great application for auto extrication. And at the time, I was on the local Henniker Rescue Squad, and so I basically started selling it. And he was a guy who was, interested in obviously the device that he had developed, and he was interested in making some money with it. And so he was basically selling franchise territories. So I bought New Hampshire. Then I bought the 6 New England states. And then next thing I know, I bought Florida.
And
And
that was the main product. I mean,
that was the main product that Boundary started with.
well,
And at the time, I was a selectman in town, which is basically, one of the town fathers, and it was an elected position every 3 years. And I had actually in New Hampshire, we have some really funny rules and regulations, but every 5 years you have to preambulate the town boundaries. And so we were out there one day when I was trying to figure out a name for the company, and interestingly enough, we came across this tree that was called the Bound Tree. It was a tree that marked the boundary between Henniker, Hopkinton, and Warner. And so I said, wow, that's a good name. I said, why don't I would call it Bound Tree Corporation? And of course, then when people started calling, they thought I was selling chainsaws. I mean, I'm not sure what they thought I was selling, but it was kind of funny because they were asking about forest products and stuff like that when obviously we were selling medical devices. So ultimately, the name changed to Boundary Medical so that it was a little bit more in line with what the types of products we were selling. So we teamed up with ultimately I bought the patent rights off of Sam, and so that
Sam Sherman, is that what his
yeah,
name
Sam Sherman, right?
is?
And I mean, it was funny because it wasn't actually, I'm trying to think of what we called it, the Sherman short spine board after him, because it was named some kind of universal splint or something like that beforehand. And so we changed the name, basically changed a lot of the material the product was made of, because it was made out of cotton duck. You know, he had a sailmaker in Martha's Vineyard producing the body conforming vest. And then what happened is we wound up taking and using a new product that was out now called Ripstop Nylon, and it was Cordura nylon, and it was kind of ripstop because um, which was a great feature because in a car crash, a car wreck, you're putting that body conforming vest on, and it's metal and glass and everything, so it's always getting torn or ripped, and so the longevity of the things uh, wasn't that long. So we made it out of this ripstop nylon, and it lasted pretty much forever because when a tear happened, it didn't go any further than that tear. So we developed that gave us multicolored because it was orange and it used to get dirty and bloody and vomitous because when it's been used in that kind of a scenario. So now it could come in any different color that they made the ripstop nylon, which was great. So that's how Boundary started. We started with one product, and then we ultimately we went to a trade show. I think it was in California, and where I met a number of new people in the business, and one of them was a guy by the name of Les Sherman, who was totally unrelated to Sam Sherman, who owned Impact Instrumentation, and he had a suction unit that in aspirators that he made. And anyway, so and then over the years we met a whole bunch of other people too, but we get introduced because we were basically advertising, the Sherman board in the national EMS magazines and stuff, today, EMS Today. We get introduced to a guy by the name of Tom Blackstone, who was um, the ad executive for EMS magazine, and he put us in touch with a company called All Orthopedic Appliances that manufactured the fracture pack, and they were out of Florida, and they were looking to basically find somebody to take over the product in terms of distribution. They wanted to still make it, but they didn't want to have anything to do with distribution because they were making cervical collars, like the post-operative cervical kind of collars that, were tan in color. You know the ones I'm talking about?
Mhm. The
There you
Philly
go.
collar? You
It was
talking
two
Philly?
P. It was like a Philadelphia collar,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah. Anyway, so they made those, and their sales reps were basically commission sales reps, and they would go into hospitals and sell, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of collars to the hospitals. And the fracture pack was, I think it sold for $250, and it basically was like a 7 or 8 piece package that could basically stabilize and immobilize fractures and shoulder clavicle and legs and arms and so forth. And it was made out of it was made out of a neoprene product, and it was a lot of Velcro and so forth, and it came in a bag. And so anyway, we cut a deal with him, and we wound up becoming their exclusive distributor, manufacturer rep, or whatever the heck you want to call it. But anyway, they made it all for us, and we packaged it in. We bought all the pieces and then packaged it here in Henniker. And interestingly enough, so we wound up having two products. And then from there, we developed wooden backboards. We got a line on a 14 ply Baltic birch manufacturer. It was basically making what do you call those things? Concrete forms out of them, for building houses and stuff. So we had them. We would import the wood from Finland and then put it into our jigs and make backboards. It was the strongest backboard on the market. Of course, over the years, plastics came into play and cross contamination with the HIV issue and everything. So wooden backboards kind of went by the wayside,
Yeah.
But we made a good living on wooden backboards up until that point.
Hey, Dave. So if you were to kind of trace the curve of Boundtree, did each of your improvements or big jumps happen with new and incredible products or new and incredible acquisitions? I mean, what were the main steps?
Well, it was kind of a combination of things, because, like, I'll give you an example. We had a distributor that basically sold our products, and it was in Massachusetts. It was called Emergency Medical Supplies of New England. And this guy was a real sharp guy. And ironically, his name was Steve Austin, like the $6 million man. And anyway, he had a great business going. And so we actually started selling other products in New Hampshire. So we were like his sales rep for New Hampshire, and he was all over New England. But this guy had kind of a knack. He started private labeling everything, like OB kits and airway kits and ice packs and different things like that. He even was the first, I think he was one of the first people other than Dynamed that actually private labeled their own blood pressure cuffs and stethoscopes. And, so when somebody needed another blood pressure cuff, they looked at the old one and saw the label on it, and the numbers, 800 number was right there and everything. Well, anyway, this guy kind of got in trouble. He was growing too fast and was doing the crazy things, and we were selling stuff for him. And I remember an order that we got from Dartmouth Medical Center, which is, the teaching hospital here in New Hampshire. And they had just formed an emergency medical service district. And I sold a $10,000 order for different supplies for them to get that going. And this guy made, I don't know, $3,600, and I made $600. I said, there's something wrong with this picture. And so I was starting to think about, maybe branching out and picking up some of the lines that they had, to the point where I was actually a J&J rep, but I didn't have the J&J account. A guy by the name Sal Appolito had it. He was in New Jersey, and I would buy half the order and he'd ship it to me. And we kind of worked and piggybacked with other people to get us to where we were. So anyway, that's there's a lot of long stories with this one in terms of, emergency medical supplies in New England. He owed me, I think it was $7,000 in product that he bought from me. And so, I could see the handwriting on the wall because my commission checks were getting slower to get to me and stuff. And so on a Wednesday, I drove down to Bourne, Massachusetts, and picked up basically $7,000 worth of product that I could turn into cash. And his bill was paid with me. Well, the next day, the sheriff came and forced them into involuntary bankruptcy. 5 companies, Robert Shaw, Furno, Washington, Impact Instrumentation, I forget, and somebody else, forced them into bankruptcy because they owed them so much money. I got my money and ultimately got my money by selling the product that I picked up from him. And it was great.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
unbelievable.
Yeah. And then, so I'm not sure
So
how many steps are there between then and 2005 when we met. I mean, I
that
remember
was
you
that was
were.
like 1984.
I know there's a lot of steps for Boundtree, but
Yeah.
eventually
Well, I
you
mean,
became.
because like I was only doing it part-time from 78 to 84. I was only doing it part-time because I was still running the ski area. I was at the ski area from 74 to 84, 10 years.
And so when would you say that you became the biggest distributor in the US? When did Boundtree reach that mark?
Closer about the time that we met.
Yeah.
But I mean, the interesting thing is that every time I served in the state senate for 8 years, from 1988 to 96, and during that period of time, Boundtree grew, and the people who I had working for me were running the company and so forth, and but every time we bought a company, another company down in Massachusetts, when we were doing about a million, I don't know, 1.5 million or something like that, and they were doing about 1.2 million, and so basically it doubled us. And every time we did another deal, it seemed like it doubled us in terms of volume.
Yeah.
We were doing 7 million, and ALS was doing, I don't know, almost 7 million, I guess, and it doubled us. And then, you know, so we've Boundary has bought up a lot of the competitors in different, parts of the regions all around the
Tell the
country.
story about that, the more medical story.
The more medical story is kind of an interesting one because at one point, um, there's a company that a friend of mine who's unfortunately now gone. He got killed in a tragic automobile bicycle accident, and he was the guy on the bicycle. His name was Hank Cheney, and he was on our board of directors. But Hank and I almost looked enough like to be brothers. And interesting enough, we'd be at trade shows together, and they said, "Are you guys brothers?" And of course, he would razz my mother about this all the time, because my mother was one of the people who worked for Boundtree, putting together first aid kits and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And but anyway, um, More Medical was a company that went through a lot of ice packs. And Hank was the executive director of Work Incorporated, which was a handicap sheltered workshop in Quincy, Massachusetts. And they were making product for the General Service Administration and the government. They were making urinary leg bags and different types of bags like that for the VA. Actually, through for the General Service Administration. And then they started making hot and cold packs. Well, Boundtree became um, the marketing arm for that. So we would sell them, and we would private label. So we went and set up More Medical, and we made all their ice packs. And I mean, it's funny because people were buying their ice packs, but they were actually buying it was our ice packs, and but it had More Medicals because we private label for them. So anyway, at one point, they more medical, the young guys that were running their kind of their purchasing arm and so forth, and their sales arm, you know, sat down and said, let's have a meeting. We want to talk to you about maybe acquiring Boundary. And so Hank and I went to this meeting with them, and it was on neutral territory in Massachusetts. So it was between New Hampshire and Connecticut in the middle.
Hmm.
And so Hank and I drove down there one day, and we were driving down there, and he says, well, what do you really think? What do you really want to do, Dave? And Hank would say, and I said, I don't know. I just, I don't know. I'm too young to sell out now. I said, this was ancient history here. I mean, a long time ago, and I wasn't ready to go anywhere because we were doing great things. So Hank, out of the blue, I almost drove off the road when he said this. He said, well, let's try to buy them. And I said, what? What are you, crazy? They're a publicly traded company. He says, yeah, I know. And I said, well, in order to do that, we'd have to do a reverse merger, which means we would be a publicly traded company. And so when we get into the meeting, we flipped the tables on him and said, no, we'd like to buy you. And of course, one of the more senior guys in the group says, what's this guy, crazy or something? And the other guy said, I think it was Jim Silverio, turned to him and says, don't discount anything Dave Currier says. He says, if he's probably damn serious about this. And of course it never happened, but it was a doable thing because it wouldn't have taken a lot of money to buy out controlling shares in the company. And so it was something that we actually considered at one point.
Now we'll just get into the meat of it. How does the warehouse shift from being the original Boundary warehouse to become a brewery?
That was kind of a sad story because, quite frankly, I wouldn't be in the beer business now, except for the fact that Boundary decided that that their best organized warehouse in their nine in the system, that they were going to move it to be closer to their medical surgical division, which was in New York. And neither one of those exists there now. It's in Philadelphia now. So but the New England, they wanted to be closer to New York sales for some reason, in upstate New York sales, and I didn't understand the whole rationale for that, but I was no longer involved, so it was not my decision. So they basically gave me notice that they weren't going to renew the lease. I owned the building, so that they weren't going to renew the lease, and so they gave me, I think it was 16 months to figure out what the hell to do with that building. It's 24,000 square feet, and I had to put something in there that was going to, pay the mortgage.
Huh. So I didn't actually realize that was the starting point. It was, I got to find something to put in this building.
Well, I did, but and the thing is that I was also on the board. I'm on the board of a small Catholic college in Warner, New Hampshire, and it was graduation time, and a bunch of the guys were getting ready to graduate, and they were saying they'd like to start a business and stuff. And I overheard them say that, and I said, "Oh yeah, well, what did you want to do?" And and I said, "Well, let's sit down and talk." And so I think there were 3 or 4 of them over there, and the long and the short of it is we started going around looking at different things that we could probably put in there. And then somebody came up, I don't know, and to this day I don't remember exactly who came up with the idea of the brewery, but it turned out to the fact that the academic dean, who is now retired, who lives in New Mexico, Santa Fe, his son started a brewery in New Hampshire, Tuckerman's. It's been around for 20 years. And so anyway, we went up and saw him, and I said, this is really unbelievable. I said, this could really probably work. So we went and viewed a few more other breweries around, and yeah, that's what stuck. We were throwing all these things against the wall to see what would stick, and the brewery did. Now, in hindsight, I think that, had I known how capital intense this business is, and it's major capital intense. I mean, every time you want to put on more volume, it's another $20,000 for a 30 barrel, fermenter that you need, and so on and so forth. Because you can only use a fermenter twice in a month because it takes 10 to 15, 20 days, depending on what you're brewing, to ferment. It only takes a couple of hours to make the batch, but you got to put it into the fermenters to make it, make the alcohol part of it, and then so forth. But it's so you only got to use them twice a month, and the more volume you do, the more fermenters you need. I mean, when we started, we had 3 15-barrel fermenters and 1 30-barrel fermenters and 2 30-barrel, 34-barrel bright tanks, which is the last process in the step where we basically, carbonate and get the beer ready for kegs or canning or whatever, bottling.
But you didn't know anything about this stuff, right? I mean,
I didn't know. Yeah, I knew how to drink a beer, but I didn't know a lot about the beer business. And I'll be the first to admit it. And I still have a lot to learn. But just like anything else, you hire the best you can find, and that's what does it. In fact, Devin, our brewer, last month was the brewer of the year from the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. The brewers all, as a group, joined that organization so that we could take advantage of their health care and their workers' compensation self-insured plans and stuff. And as a result, they added a couple of more categories, and one of them was Brewer of the Year. And the first year of that award, our brewer won it.
nice.
And he's probably one of the more educated brewers in the country, definitely in New England, because he actually has a 4-year degree in brewing science and some advanced work as well. But he got his degree. I mean, this is an interesting story because, like, in the United States, to go to brewing school, you have to be 21 because you can't make beer. It's against the law if you're not 21.
You can't learn
So
the chemistry of it before?
no, because you're making alcohol. It's against the law, federal law.
All right.
And so anyway, he said, "Okay, screw you guys. I'm going to go to England and go to school where it can be 18." And that's what he did. And then he brewed all around the world. He was in Australia and New Zealand, and he came back here to Connecticut where he grew up, and that's where we met up with him. And he's been here 4 years now, going on 5 years now
Wow.
already. So.
And so would you say that's the crux step for a brewery, is to have the best brewer around?
Well, you got to have a talented brewer and somebody who knows the science of it, because I don't know how many people Sam, that had bought a home brewing kit and started to brew, and the first time they did it, it didn't work. I got 2 women here, Taylor and Amanda, are laughing because they probably tried it themselves. Can you see them
My
laughing?
dad, oh my goodness, I
Yeah.
forgot all about that. My dad used to make wine when I was a kid, but one year I'm still a kid, but anyway, he just decided to make beer one year, and it was god awful.
Yeah, it's god awful. You know why? It's because bacteria is your worst enemy in this business. That's why our brewery is spotless and clean. And it's amazing because I've tasted some home brews before, and they're pretty foul. and that's why not everybody's in the brewing business. That
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. So what are the next steps with the brewery? What do you think?
Well, the biggest step right now is trying to survive COVID.
Yeah.
Because, people, I mean, I have my mask in my pocket right now. Unfortunately, nobody's here, and I don't have to worry about wearing it on basically March 15th. And so March and April, we in particularly April, because we did have the first 15 days of March, but the second half of March, we didn't sell 1 pint of beer, and we sold no pints of beer in April.
Wow.
In the tap room. That's the tasting room.
Wow.
And so and then they began to open it up a little bit in let's see, May, May 15th, I think it was. And then we could have outside seating. Of course, it wasn't 20 below zero anymore with 17 inches of snow. So we could do that. And we had picnic tables, and we had a huge parking lot. So we were able to expand into that a little bit better. And that worked out really well. So we had 52 seats outside and 40 something seats inside. And so it worked out really well. And the seating inside was basically the 6 foot, 6 people to a table, 6 feet apart, yada, yada, yada. And that worked out really well until what, last Saturday when we had a snowstorm, and it basically put the curtailing to outside seating.
Yeah.
Nobody was sitting out there, even with the patio heaters out there. It was just too bloody cold. And we had to take all that outside seating down because we had to plow the parking lot. So, the outside seating is what's gone by now. And sales for December are starting to, they dropped off by 80% the first week of the month. They're improving now and getting better, but so we're just planning the whole schedule of what we produce for beers, because we don't have the keg sales now. The keg sales have dropped off dramatically, just like there were no keg sales the end of March and April and May, because none of the restaurants were open. That didn't start happening until June. But by the same token, we were transferring our capacity for kegs into cans, and those were being sold in grocery stores through distribution. And so.
But the tap room is the main driver, right? Is that?
The tap room is where
Right.
people can come in and do samples, and if they're tourists. So over the summer we had a great summer.
Yeah.
And we were having 65% of the people, anywhere from 50 to 65% of the people on a daily basis, especially on the weekends, were new people, new customers, and that we tracked that by credit card usage, not specific names or anything, just the last 4 digits. And if that card came back up again, that means he was a repeat customer or a returning customer. And otherwise, we did. In the program that we use, was able to track that kind of stuff. And so we had a heck of a thing for people who were traveling and would swing by there and stop in and have a beer. And I think one of the things that I think was most helpful for us, quite frankly, was the fact that we actually we have a great variety of beers on tap. It's funny because like a lot of people have IPAs. So they have a double IPA, a triple IPA, an IPA, a New England IPA, a California IPA. But we have a lot of different varieties. Like this one here is sour flower. And this is basically a dry hop sour ale. And so we have a porter, we have some stouts, we have some lagers. And so the most common compliment that we got all summer and all year has been that they love coming here because we have a variety of beers, not just IPAs. I mean, IPA is, obviously there are a lot of IPA drinkers out there, but there are a lot of other kind of beer drinkers out there as well. And I think they appreciated the fact that when they came to our place, they had a variety of choices to taste.
So I should know some of this, but I don't know any of it really. What's the process for a new beer? Does someone say, let's build this other beer, and then there's a process for it? Or is there a mad scientist that comes up with a potion and then, I like it, and now let's bring this to market?
That's where I leave the process. That's what I hired the brewer to do, is to be the expert in the brewing factors, and he basically determines a style of beer that we're going to use. And then collectively, from a marketing standpoint, we decide on the names. I mean, we've had names like, well, the Hopslinger is our most popular beer, which is ironically an IPA. It's our biggest seller. We sell, I don't know, 800 to 1,000 cases, a month of that.
I knew you were, I should interject. I knew you were doing well because I used to work in Kauai, and a nurse there is from New Hampshire. He goes back periodically. I didn't say to go to Henniker Brewing Company. He told me about Henniker Brewing Company, and he said, your hop slinger is the best.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. See, and the thing is, our porter is another one that's very good, and in fact, it's been um, a lot of porters and darker beers are considered winter kind of beers. Our beer our porter. It's called Working Man's Porter, and it's been very popular year round. And I attribute that to the fact that it's not, thick and robust like some of the other porters are or darker beers are, and it's got our porter has a great flavor. It's wonderful, and so anyway, the um, that's becoming our most second popular beer. And we have a double IPA that's called Damn Sure.
yeah.
We have a beer that we developed, which is another double IPA. It's called Hugs from Pat, and they all have a little different twist to them, in the sense that we use different hops that gives different flavors and different tastes and features. And it's been great because like we have some locals who we've been backing off on a couple of things because we don't want to have too much beer in the cooler, because beer has a shelf life of 4 and 5 months, and so you don't want to be brewing all this beer and then having no place for it to go because of COVID. So we've been spacing out things and stuff, and Damn Sure hasn't been out for a while, and it's going to be hitting the streets next week. But the thing is that some of our locals are saying, "When the hell's Damn Sure coming?" And they, because that's one of their favorites, and they,
Oh.
Hey, what's going on here? And of course, one of our favorites that's really coming is our double roast. It's a coffee stout, and it's a double because it's really got a lot of different. I think it has 3 different coffee beans in it, and we've teamed up with a coffee roaster. Last couple of years, we've used White Mountain Coffee roasters, and we're using Union Coffee roasters down in Milford this year for that one.
And on the marketing side of it, so what led to the label transition? I never figured that out.
This here is a bottle. This is a 22-ounce bomber. And this is the label. And it basically was a gentleman, and his name was Ezekiel Hop.
Yeah.
He was there was a story to all these things. And the problem is, if you're not standing out in a counter, in a grocery store, and you could tell a story, people don't know what this is all about. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the people are running in and they just want Hopslinger. They grab it. So anyway, this is the format that we went with. So people know that's a Henniker beer. It's every one of the beers is identical because it's got the same kind of label, same format. And so people they go into a grocery store, convenience store, they know exactly where that label is, they can grab it. For example, this is a can, this is an original can of Hopslinger. It's the same label. Okay.
Yeah.
But Ezekiel Hop, the story went that basically, in fact, he was a sergeant in the Union Army. And the story went that they ran out of hops because every company had a brewer because it was safer to drink beer than it was water or milk. Because back then, because of the bacteria back then. And so they had plenty of hops, so they shot the hops at the enemy. They ran out of bullets or whatever the hell they had. But and that's that. Those were the stories. But the thing is, when you're in a grocery store, you know, we don't have somebody sitting there telling the story all the time. So we were trying to modernize the label, and that's why we went that way.
Yeah. Did you use the same artist?
The same name, Hopslinger.
Yeah.
But
the same artist did the new.
Yes, yes. We've had the same artist since day one. The guy that did this bottle, did this can. His name is Jameson Perkins.
Oh.
Hey, these were great, but this was 22 ounces though. It was too much beer in one serving, as opposed to a 12-ounce can. And today, you can't find 12-ounce cans. Companies that are just getting into business right now is a shortage of cans. I have no idea where they're gonna get these cans, because basically the three can companies that are making cans today are at capacity.
Really?
I have over 1 million cans on order right now.
Wow.
And except for 6 pallets of them, I have no idea when the next truckload is coming in. They've added acreage upon acreage. I mean, when I first got my license here in New Hampshire, we were the 7th brewery. No, 4th. Oh my God, now I can't even remember. Can you imagine that? I used to tell this story all the time when I did the tours at the brewery. We were the 14th, I think, brewery, or the 15th or 16th or something like that brewery in the state of New Hampshire. Now there's over 100. Really? Nationwide, there's like 8,000 of them. It's like there's one on every corner.
So is it peak? Do you think it's at a downslope now?
I would not say that. I don't think it's moving as fast as it was, but there are people that are looking. There are people that are going out of business for any number of reasons and stuff. They're just not keeping up with the times, and ahead of the curve. And then they're not paying attention to business and kind of losing it. But yeah, it's a trying time to be in the beer business, because I mean any hospitality business it is, because of the COVID. The COVID thing is playing havoc. I mean, most restaurants right now are trading an old dollar for a new dollar. They're not making any money. They're barely keeping the lights on.
So you haven't had any? Have you had any workers test positive or not?
Knock wood. Nope.
Yeah.
When we're open, when the tap room is open, everybody wears masks in the tap room. Any customers coming in have to have masks on until they sit down at a table. If they get up to get a beer, or they get up to go to the bathroom, or they get up to go look at the merchandise rack to buy a t-shirt or a hat or a glass or whatever, they have to have a mask on. And we've been very, religious about doing that. So.
Yeah. Right.
Which one's your favorite? What's your favorite?
You know what? It depends on what month it is. It's almost, although, Henniker Kolsch is a good, and Miles and Miles is another one. I used to love Amber Apparition, and there's still a lot of people when they come in will say, "Hey, how come Amber Apparition was named after Ocean-born Mary, who was a woman who haunts a house here in Henniker?" And there's a book written on Ocean-born Mary. You can look it up. But so Amber Apparition was the name of that, but I mean I like Hopslinger. I like them all.
For these footy pajamas.
Footy pajamas is great.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when I first tried this, the first sip of this, I was like all puckered up, it's just because to me it was. Although most of our sour beers are really good. They're not.
I know, I
they're-
want to try that strawberry rhubarb sour you have.
Exactly
Oh,
what
yeah,
I was eyeballing
yeah,
over here.
that's picnic. Yeah.